My name is Patricia, and I am 54 years old. Yesterday was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life, my son Michael's graduation from law school. Instead, it became one of the most humiliating experiences I have ever endured. But today, less than 24 hours later, everything has changed, and my son is learning a lesson about respect, gratitude, and consequences that he will never forget. To understand what happened at that graduation ceremony, you need to know about the 18 years I spent raising Michael as a single mother, and the sacrifices I made to ensure he could achieve his dreams, even when those dreams seemed impossible for a family with our limited resources. Michael's father, David, left when Michael was 7 years old. Not for another woman, not for a dramatic midlife crisis, but simply because he found fatherhood and marriage more demanding than he had expected. He moved across the country, remarried within 2 years, started a new family, and became a sporadic presence in Michael's life, showing up for birthday parties and Christmas mornings, but disappearing whenever real parenting was required. I was 28 years old when David left, with a 7-year-old son, a part-time job at a dental office, and no clear plan for how to build a stable life as a single mother. But I had something more important than a plan. I had absolute determination that Michael's life would not be limited by his father's abandonment or our financial circumstances. I worked 2 jobs for most of Michael's childhood: the dental office during the day and cleaning commercial buildings at night. I took classes at the community college on weekends, slowly earning the credits I needed for a business degree that would eventually allow me to move into better-paying work. I lived in the same small apartment for 12 years, not because I loved it, but because the rent was affordable and the school district was good. Every dollar I earned went toward Michael's future. I bought his school supplies, paid for his sports equipment, drove him to practice and games and academic competitions. When he showed an interest in debate team, I learned about debate formats so I could help him practice. When he decided he wanted to go to law school, I researched programs, helped him prepare for the LSAT, and began saving money for law school tuition. Michael was a good student and a good son during those years. He understood that our resources were limited, and he appreciated the sacrifices I was making for his education and activities. He worked part-time jobs during high school and contributed to his own expenses when he could. When he graduated as valedictorian and received a full scholarship to a prestigious university, we both cried with joy and relief. But during Michael's sophomore year in college, David reappeared in our lives in a more significant way. He had divorced his second wife, moved back to our city for a job opportunity, and decided he wanted to rebuild his relationship with his son. At first, I was cautiously optimistic about this development. Michael had always struggled with questions about his father's absence, and I thought having a relationship with David might be good for him emotionally. David had done well for himself financially during the years he had been absent from Michael's life. He owned a successful consulting business, lived in an expensive house in the best part of town, and drove luxury cars. When he began spending time with Michael, he could offer experiences and opportunities that I had never been able to provide. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, connections to influential people in the business and legal communities. Michael began spending more time with his father, and I was genuinely happy to see him enjoying these experiences and developing what seemed like a meaningful relationship with David. But I began to notice subtle changes in how Michael talked about our family situation and his future plans. Where he had once expressed gratitude for the sacrifices I had made, he began to talk about how difficult it had been to grow up without financial security. Where he had once been proud of our modest lifestyle and the independence we had built together, he began to make comments about how limiting it had been to grow up in a small apartment with a mother who was always working. I tried to dismiss these comments as normal adolescent processing of childhood experiences, but they hurt more than I expected them to. I had given everything I had to ensure that Michael's childhood was as rich and full as possible, despite our financial limitations. Hearing him describe that childhood as somehow deficient or limiting felt like a betrayal of everything we had been through together. During Michael's junior year, David met Linda, a divorced woman with 2 teenage children of her own. Linda was warm, outgoing, and financially successful in her own right. She owned a small chain of boutique stores and lived a lifestyle that was comfortable without being extravagant. David and Linda married quickly, and she immediately embraced her role as Michael's stepmother with enthusiasm and genuine affection. I tried to be supportive of this development, understanding that Michael could benefit from having additional positive adult figures in his life. Linda seemed to genuinely care about Michael, and she made efforts to include him in family activities and to build a relationship that was separate from her relationship with his father. But as Michael's relationship with David and Linda deepened, his relationship with me began to change in ways that were subtle but painful. He still called regularly and visited when he was home from college, but our conversations became more superficial, more focused on practical matters and less on the personal connection we had always shared. More concerning was how Michael began to talk about his future plans. Where he had once included me in discussions about law school, career goals, and life decisions, he began to defer to David's opinions and advice. When he was accepted to several law schools, he asked David to help him make the final decision about which one to attend, despite the fact that I had been researching law schools and saving money for his tuition for years. When Michael started law school, David and Linda offered to help with tuition and living expenses. I was grateful for this support, knowing that law school was expensive and that any financial assistance would reduce the burden on Michael and on my own savings. But I also began to feel like my role in Michael's life was being gradually diminished, replaced by people who could offer him opportunities and experiences that I could never afford. The changes in Michael's attitude toward me became more pronounced during his law school years. When he talked about his career aspirations, he would mention the connections David could provide in the legal community, the internship opportunities that Linda's business contacts might offer, the financial security that came with having successful parents who could support him as he launched his career. I tried to remind him, gently, about the 18 years I had spent working multiple jobs to support his education, the sacrifices I had made to ensure he could pursue his dreams, the foundation I had built that had made his current success possible. But these conversations seemed to make Michael uncomfortable, as if acknowledging my contributions somehow diminished the excitement he felt about his new family relationships and opportunities. The dynamic reached a breaking point during Michael's final year of law school, when he was applying for positions at prestigious law firms. David arranged for Michael to have informational interviews with partners at several top firms, leveraging his business connections to open doors that would have been difficult for Michael to access on his own. When Michael was offered a position at one of the most competitive firms in the city, he was ecstatic, and rightfully so. It was an incredible opportunity that would launch his career in ways he had always dreamed about. But when he called to tell me about the job offer, he spent most of the conversation thanking David and Linda for their connections and support, mentioning my contributions to his success only briefly and almost as an afterthought. "Mom, I know you worked hard when I was growing up," he said, "but Dad and Linda have really made this possible. Without Dad's connections and Linda's support, I never could have gotten this opportunity." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. 18 years of working 2 jobs, of saving every dollar for his education, of driving him to activities and helping him with homework and encouraging him through setbacks, and my contribution to his success was dismissed as working hard when he was growing up. But I didn't say anything. I congratulated him on the job offer, told him how proud I was of his accomplishments, and tried to push down the hurt and resentment that was building in my chest. I told myself that what mattered was Michael's happiness and success, not whether he properly acknowledged the role I had played in making that success possible. The graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning in May, and I had been looking forward to it for months. I had requested the day off from work, bought a new outfit specifically for the occasion, and planned to take Michael and whoever else wanted to join us out for a celebratory dinner afterward. 2 weeks before the graduation, Michael called to discuss the logistics for the day. I expected we would be coordinating plans for the ceremony and the celebration afterward, but instead, Michael told me that David and Linda were planning the entire day and that I should just plan to attend the ceremony itself. "Mom, Dad, and Linda have made reservations at this really nice restaurant for after the ceremony," Michael said. "It's pretty expensive, so they're covering everyone's meals. You're welcome to join us, of course." The way he said it made it clear that I was being invited as a guest to a celebration planned and paid for by other people, not as the mother who had been planning her son's graduation celebration for 3 years. "Michael," I said carefully, "I was hoping we could plan the graduation day together. I've been looking forward to this for so long, and I have some ideas about how we might celebrate." "I appreciate that, Mom, but Dad and Linda have already made all the arrangements. They've booked a private room at the restaurant, invited extended family, planned a whole celebration. It would be awkward to change plans now." I realized that my son was not consulting with me about his graduation celebration. He was informing me about plans that had been made without my input and asking me to fit myself into arrangements that other people had organized. "What about the ceremony itself?" I asked. "Where will I be sitting?" "Oh, there are reserved seats for family," Michael said. "Dad got tickets for the front section for him and Linda's parents who are driving in for the ceremony. I think your seat is in the section behind them." My heart sank as I realized that David and Linda were being treated as the primary family, with reserved seats in the front section, while I was relegated to whatever seats were available in the sections behind them. My son's stepmother, who had been in his life for 3 years, was being given the place of honor that should have belonged to the mother who had raised him for 18 years. Michael, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I'm your mother. I've been to every school event, every game, every important moment in your life for 18 years. Don't you think I should be sitting with the primary family? There was a long pause before Michael responded, and when he did, his voice had a defensive edge that I had never heard before when he talked to me. Mom, I understand this might be disappointing, but Dad is paying for the reserved seats, and Linda's parents are traveling a long way to be here. It's just more practical this way. You'll still have a good view of the ceremony. I realized that practicality had nothing to do with this arrangement. Michael was choosing to honor David and Linda as his primary family and asking me to accept a secondary role in his most important day. He was asking me to be grateful for whatever seat I was offered and to celebrate arrangements that had been made without considering my feelings or my role in his life. The morning of the graduation, I arrived at the ceremony venue early, hoping to find Michael and wish him luck before the event began. I found him in the area where graduates were gathering with their families, surrounded by David, Linda, and Linda's parents, who were taking pictures and making a big fuss over his achievement. When Michael saw me approaching, he smiled and gave me a quick hug. "Hi, Mom, glad you could make it." Glad I could make it, as if I were a family friend who had been invited to attend, not the mother who had sacrificed everything to make this moment possible. David and Linda were polite but distant, greeting me cordially but immediately returning their attention to Michael and their own family members. Linda's parents were introduced to me briefly, but it was clear that I was not considered part of the inner circle of people who were celebrating Michael's achievement. As we were taking pictures, I overheard Linda's mother ask Michael about his plans for after graduation, and I heard him say, "Well, Mom and Dad have been so supportive during law school, and they've helped me get connected with the firm where I'm going to be working. I couldn't have done any of this without them." He was referring to Linda as Mom. In front of her parents, in front of other graduates and families in front of me, he was calling the woman who had been in his life for 3 years Mom, while his actual mother stood 10 feet away. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. In all the years since David had left, through all the difficulties and challenges we had faced together, Michael had never once suggested that he saw me as anything other than his mother, the most important person in his life. Now he was publicly claiming Linda as his mother while I stood invisible in the background. When it was time for the ceremony to begin, I found my seat in the section that had been reserved for me, several rows behind where David, Linda, and Linda's parents were sitting in the front row. From where I was sitting, I could see the back of Linda's head as she leaned forward with pride and excitement, occupying the seat that should have been mine. During the ceremony, when graduates were called to receive their degrees, I watched David and Linda stand and cheer as Michael walked across the stage. They were holding hands, beaming with pride, acting like the parents who had supported him through law school, which I suppose they had at least financially, but I was the parent who had supported him through everything that came before law school. I was the parent who had worked 2 jobs so he could focus on his studies. I was the parent who had helped him with homework, driven him to activities, encouraged him through setbacks, and saved every possible dollar to ensure he could pursue higher education. And I was sitting in the back, behind strangers, watching other people receive credit for his success. After the ceremony, there was a reception where graduates and families could mingle and take more pictures. I approached Michael to congratulate him, but he was surrounded by David's extended family and Linda's relatives, all of whom were treating him like their own family member and discussing his future plans as if they had been part of his life forever. When I finally managed to get a moment with Michael, I tried to express how proud I was of his achievement, but our conversation was brief and awkward, interrupted by other family members who wanted his attention. "Michael," I said, "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. You've worked so hard for this moment." "Thanks, Mom," he said, but he was already looking over my shoulder at someone else who wanted to talk to him. "I really appreciate you being here." Again, as if I were a guest who had been invited to attend, not his mother who had been dreaming of this day for years. The final humiliation came at the restaurant, where David and Linda had planned the celebration dinner. I was seated at the far end of a long table, away from Michael and the people who were being treated as his primary family. During the toasts and speeches about Michael's achievement, David and Linda spoke about how proud they were of their son and how excited they were about his future. When it was my turn to speak, I offered a brief toast about how proud I was of Michael's hard work and determination. But my words felt hollow in a room where other people were being credited with his success, and I was treated like a distant relative who had been invited out of obligation. I left the restaurant early, claiming I had a headache, and drove home alone while my son continued celebrating with the people he now considered his real family. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the same apartment where I had raised Michael for 12 years, and I made a decision that I should have made years earlier. I decided that if Michael wanted to build his life around people who could offer him financial support and social connections, instead of the person who had given him 18 years of unconditional love and sacrifice, he was free to make that choice. But he was going to make that choice without the financial safety net I had been providing, without the emergency fund I had been maintaining for his benefit, and without the inheritance I had been planning to leave him. I had spent 18 years putting Michael's needs ahead of my own, saving money for his future instead of investing in my own retirement, sacrificing opportunities and experiences so that he could have the best possible foundation for his adult life. If he no longer valued those sacrifices, if he preferred the financial support and social connections that David and Linda could provide, then he could rely on them for everything. The next morning, I called my financial advisor and made several changes to my accounts and estate planning that would ensure Michael understood the full implications of his choice to prioritize his new family over his mother. First, I moved the money I had been saving for Michael's future, an account that had grown to nearly $80,000 over the years, into my own retirement savings. This money had been intended to help him with a down payment on a house, to provide a financial cushion as he started his career, or to support him through any unexpected difficulties in his early professional life. If Michael wanted to build his future with David and Linda's support, he could ask them to provide the financial safety net that I had been preparing to offer him. Second, I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policies and retirement accounts from Michael to several charities that supported single mothers and their children. Michael would still inherit my personal possessions and whatever savings I had at the time of my death, but the substantial financial assets I had been accumulating for his benefit would go to people who might appreciate them more. Finally, I canceled several automatic payments I had been making on Michael's behalf. His car insurance, his cell phone plan, his health insurance policy that covered him until he found employment, and a credit card that I had been paying off from his college expenses. These were not large amounts of money individually, but they represented ongoing financial support that Michael had come to take for granted. If he preferred to be supported by David and Linda, he could ask them to take over these responsibilities. I also wrote Michael a letter explaining my decisions, not out of anger or spite, but out of a desire to ensure he understood the consequences of treating the person who had raised him as less important than the people who had supported him for 3 years. The letter was calm and factual, explaining that since he had chosen to build his adult life primarily around David and Linda's support and connections, I was stepping back from the financial role I had been playing in his life and redirecting those resources toward my own retirement and charitable causes that were important to me. I mailed the letter on Monday morning, along with copies of the changed beneficiary forms and a notice that his various automatic payments would be discontinued at the end of the month. Michael called me that afternoon, and I could hear panic in his voice from the moment he said hello. "Mom, I got your letter and I don't understand what you're doing. Why are you canceling my insurance and changing your will? What's going on?" "Michael," I said calmly, "nothing is going on. I'm simply adjusting my financial planning to reflect your current life situation. You've made it clear that David and Linda are your primary family now, so I'm stepping back from the financial support role I've been playing and allowing them to take over those responsibilities." "But Mom, you can't just cancel my insurance and take away the money you've been saving for me. I was counting on that money for my future. You were counting on money from someone you seated in the back row at your graduation, someone you barely acknowledged during your celebration, someone you ignored while you called your stepmother, Mom, in front of everyone who was important to you." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Michael," I continued, "for the past 3 years you have gradually replaced me with David and Linda in every important aspect of your life. They plan your celebrations, they provide your networking connections, they receive credit for your achievements, and they get called Mom and Dad, while I get treated like a distant relative who should be grateful for whatever acknowledgement you choose to give me." "Mom, that's not fair. I never said you weren't important to me." "No, you didn't say it, you showed it. At every opportunity, you chose to honor them and ignore me. You asked David to help you choose a law school instead of the person who had been researching law schools for years. You allowed Linda's parents to sit in the front row while your own mother sat behind strangers. You called Linda Mom while I stood 10 feet away." "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," Michael said, but his voice sounded defensive rather than apologetic. "This isn't about hurt feelings, Michael. This is about respect and priorities. You have made it very clear what your priorities are, and they don't include the person who raised you. So I am adjusting my priorities accordingly. But what about the money you've been saving for me? What about my health insurance? What about the help you've been giving me? Ask David and Linda," I said. "Ask the people you chose to honor as your parents. Ask the people you chose to give credit for your success. Ask the people whose opinions matter more to you than mine do." "Mom, you're being ridiculous." Just because I have a good relationship with Dad and Linda doesn't mean I don't appreciate everything you've done for me. Michael, appreciation is not something you say, it's something you show. And what you showed me at your graduation was that 18 years of sacrifice and support matter less to you than 3 years of financial assistance from people who could afford to provide it without struggling. That's not true, Michael said, but he didn't sound convinced. Really? Then tell me, Michael, when you were giving credit for your success at the graduation reception, did you mention that I worked 2 jobs for 10 years to pay for your education? Did you mention that I saved every possible dollar so you could pursue your dreams? Did you mention that I helped you with homework, drove you to activities, and supported you through every challenge you faced growing up? Another long silence. Or did you talk about how grateful you were to Mom and Dad for their support during law school, while your actual mother sat at the far end of the table like a distant relative who had been invited out of obligation? Zaid, I didn't think about it that way, Michael said quietly. No, you didn't think about it at all. You were so excited about your new family and the opportunities they could provide that you forgot about the family that got you to the point where those opportunities were even possible. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was making you feel unimportant. Michael, this isn't about making me feel unimportant. This is about treating me as unimportant. There's a difference. What can I do to fix this? He asked. You can start by understanding that actions have consequences, I said. You chose to treat David and Linda as your primary family, and now you can rely on them for the financial support and security that you were expecting from me. But Mom, they can't provide everything you've been providing. They have their own financial responsibilities, their own retirement to think about. They can't just take over everything you've been doing for me. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided that their 3 years of support were more valuable than my 18 years of sacrifice. Please, Mom, don't do this. I know I made mistakes at the graduation, but I can't lose your support now. I'm just starting my career, I have student loans, I have expenses. I need that money you've been saving, I need the insurance coverage, I need to know that you're there as a backup if something goes wrong. You need me to be there as a backup, I repeated slowly. So you can ignore me and disrespect me and treat me like an unimportant guest at the most significant events in your life. But you still need me to be there financially in case David and Linda can't provide everything you want. That's not what I meant, Michael said, but we both knew it was exactly what he meant. Michael, I spent 18 years making sure you never had to worry about financial security, educational opportunities, or having support during difficult times. I did that because I loved you and because I wanted you to have the best possible foundation for your adult life. And I'm grateful for that, he said. No, you're not grateful for it. If you were grateful for it, you would have acknowledged it at your graduation. You would have included me in your celebration planning. You would have introduced me to people as the mother who made your law school education possible, not as someone who worked hard when you were growing up. I can change, Michael said. I can do better. I can make sure you know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Michael, I don't want your gratitude now. I don't want you to appreciate me because you're afraid of losing my financial support. I want you to understand that the choices you make have consequences, and that treating people badly because you think they'll always be there for you is a mistake that can cost you more than you realize. So what happens now? He asked. Now you figure out how to build your adult life with the support system you chose, I said. You figure out how to pay for your own insurance, your own expenses, your own financial emergencies. You ask David and Linda to provide the safety net you were expecting from me. And what about our relationship? What about us? That depends on you, I said. If you want to have a relationship with me based on genuine respect and appreciation, that's something we can work toward. But if you want to continue treating me as a financial backup plan while giving credit and recognition to other people, then you can do that without my participation. After I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness exactly, because the situation was still painful and disappointing, but peace that comes from finally standing up for yourself after years of being taken for granted. Over the following days, Michael called several more times, each conversation following a similar pattern. He would start by trying to convince me that I was overreacting, that his behavior at the graduation hadn't been as bad as I was making it seem, that I was being unfair by withdrawing my financial support. But as the reality of his situation began to sink in, his tone changed. He realized that David and Linda, while generous and supportive, were not prepared to provide the comprehensive financial safety net that I had been offering. They could help with some expenses, but they couldn't replace the 18 years of savings I had accumulated for his benefit, the ongoing insurance coverage I had been providing, or the emergency fund I had maintained for his protection. More importantly, he began to understand that his treatment of me at the graduation had not been a minor social mistake, but a fundamental betrayal of the relationship we had built over 18 years. He had publicly declared that the people who had supported him for 3 years were more important to him than the person who had sacrificed everything for 18 years to make his success possible. A week after our first conversation, Michael came to my apartment unannounced. He looked tired and stressed, and when I opened the door, he immediately began crying. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treated you at the graduation, and I realize how awful I was. I'm so sorry. I was so caught up in impressing Dad and Linda and their family that I forgot about everything you've done for me." I invited him in, and we sat down in the small living room where we had spent so many evenings together during his childhood, talking about school, about his dreams, about his future. "Michael," I said gently, "I need you to understand something. This isn't about forgiveness for one bad day. This is about a pattern of behavior that has been developing for 3 years, where you have gradually replaced me with other people in every important aspect of your life." "I know," he said. "I can see it now. I got so excited about having Dad back in my life, about having financial support and connections that I'd never had before, that I started taking you for granted. I started thinking that you would always be there, no matter how I treated you. Then now," I asked, "now I realize that I almost lost the most important person in my life because I was too selfish and ungrateful to appreciate what I already had." We talked for hours that afternoon, about his childhood, about the sacrifices I had made, about the ways his relationship with David and Linda had changed his perspective on our family. Michael acknowledged that he had been treating me like a financial backup plan, while giving credit and recognition to people who had provided much less support over a much shorter period of time. "Mom, I want to make this right," he said. "I want to find a way to show you that I understand what you mean to me and that I appreciate everything you've done for my entire life." "How?" I asked. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I want to start by telling everyone the truth about how I got to where I am. I want Dad and Linda and everyone else to understand that the most important reason I was able to succeed in law school was because of the foundation you built for me during the first 18 years of my life." Over the following months, Michael began to make changes in how he talked about his success and how he included me in his life. He had conversations with David and Linda about my role in his upbringing and achievements, making sure they understood that their support, while valuable, had been built on a foundation that I had spent 18 years creating. He also began including me in decisions about his career and his future, asking for my advice and input in the same way he had asked for David's. He made an effort to ensure that when we were all together as a family, I was treated as his mother, not as a secondary figure who should be grateful for whatever acknowledgement she received. But the most significant change was in Michael's understanding of what it means to appreciate someone's sacrifice and support. He realized that appreciation is not something you express only when you need something, but something you demonstrate through your actions and choices every day. 6 months after the graduation, Michael received his first significant bonus from his new job. Instead of using it to pay down his student loans or save for a house, he used it to take me on a vacation to Europe, something I had dreamed of doing for years but had never been able to afford. "Mom," he said when he told me about the trip, "I know this doesn't make up for 18 years of sacrifice, but I want you to know that I finally understand what you gave up for me, and I want to give something back to you." The trip was wonderful, but more important than the vacation itself was what it represented. Michael's recognition that I deserved to have experiences and opportunities that were just for me, not just support and resources that I was providing for him. A year after the graduation, Michael asked me to help him plan a party to celebrate his first anniversary at the law firm. This time, I was not an invited guest at someone else's celebration. I was his partner in planning an event that would reflect both of our contributions to his success. At that party, Michael gave a speech thanking everyone who had supported him throughout his education and career. He talked about David and Linda's support during law school, but he spent most of his time talking about the 18 years of sacrifice and encouragement that had made law school possible in the first place. "My mother worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood so that I could focus on my education," he said to a room full of his colleagues and friends. "She saved every dollar she could so that I would have opportunities that seemed impossible for our family's financial situation. She believed in my dreams even when they seemed unrealistic, and she built the foundation that everything else in my life has been built upon." He looked at me across the room as he was speaking, and I saw in his eyes something that had been missing for the past 3 years. Genuine appreciation for the person I was and the role I had played in his life. "I know that none of the success I've achieved would have been possible without her sacrifice and love, and I'm grateful every day that she's my mother." The applause that followed was warm and genuine, but more importantly, I could see that Michael's colleagues and friends finally understood who had been the driving force behind his success. They understood that while David and Linda had provided valuable support, the real foundation of Michael's achievements had been built by a single mother who had given everything she had to ensure her son could pursue his dreams. After the party, as we were cleaning up, Michael pulled me aside for a conversation that I knew we both needed to have. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." "Always," I said. "Do you think you can ever forgive me for how I treated you? For taking you for granted, for embarrassing you at my graduation, for making you feel like you didn't matter?" I looked at my son, this young man I had raised with such love and hope, who had hurt me so deeply, but who had also learned from that hurt and grown into someone who could acknowledge his mistakes and work to correct them. "Michael," I said, "I forgave you the moment I saw that you truly understood what you had done wrong. But more importantly, I'm proud of you for learning from this experience and becoming someone who appreciates the people who love him." "I almost lost you," he said. "If you hadn't stood up for yourself, if you hadn't shown me the consequences of treating you badly, I might have continued taking you for granted for years." "Maybe," I said, "but you didn't lose me. And now you know something that many people never learn, that the people who love you most deserve to be treated the best, not taken for granted because you assume they'll always be there." 2 years after the graduation incident, Michael met Sarah, a young lawyer at a different firm who became the woman he would eventually marry. When Michael told me about Sarah and how serious their relationship was becoming, one of the first things he said was that he wanted her to understand the kind of mother I had been and the role I had played in his life. "I want her to know," he said, "that the most important thing about me is not my job or my education or my success. The most important thing about me is that I was raised by a woman who taught me about sacrifice, determination, and unconditional love." When Michael and Sarah got engaged, he asked me to help plan the engagement party, not because he needed my financial contribution, but because he wanted me to be his partner in celebrating this important milestone in his life. At the engagement party, I had the place of honor that had been denied to me at his graduation. I sat at the head table with Michael and Sarah. I was introduced to her family as the woman who had raised Michael, and I was included in all the toasts and speeches as the mother who had made Michael's success and happiness possible. But more importantly, Sarah herself sought me out during the party to thank me for raising the man she had fallen in love with. "Patricia," she said, "Michael has told me so much about the sacrifice you made for him, about how hard you worked to give him opportunities, about how you supported his dreams even when they seemed impossible. I want you to know that I can see all of that in the person he is today." "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's the most appreciative, grateful person I've ever met," she said. "He never takes anything for granted, he always acknowledges people who help him, and he's incredibly generous with his time and resources, because he learned from you what it means to give everything you have for someone you love." I realized that Michael's experience of losing, and then regaining my respect and support, had taught him lessons about gratitude and appreciation that would benefit him for the rest of his life. He had learned through painful experience the difference between taking people for granted and truly valuing them. When Michael and Sarah got married, I was not relegated to the back row or treated as a secondary family member. I was honored as the mother of the groom, given a place of pride in the ceremony and celebration, and acknowledged in speeches as the person who had raised Michael to be the man Sarah had chosen to marry. During his wedding speech, Michael talked about the lessons his mother had taught him about love, sacrifice, and commitment. "My mother showed me," he said, "that real love means putting someone else's needs ahead of your own, that commitment means staying dedicated even when things are difficult, and that the most valuable things in life are not the ones that come easily, but the ones you work hard to build and maintain." He looked at me as he was speaking, and I knew that he was talking not just about the lessons I had taught him through my sacrifice during his childhood, but about the lesson I had taught him when I stood up for myself after his graduation. He had learned that relationships require mutual respect and appreciation, that love is not a license to treat people badly, and that even the strongest bonds can be damaged if they are not properly maintained. 3 years after his graduation, Michael and Sarah bought their first house. When Michael called to tell me about the purchase, he said something that showed me how much his perspective on family and support had changed. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said. "Sarah and I have been talking about our finances, about planning for the future, about making sure we can take care of the people who are important to us. We want to know if you would consider letting us help you with your retirement planning." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean that for 18 years you put my needs ahead of your own financial security. You spent money on my education and opportunities instead of investing in your own retirement. Now that I'm financially stable, I want to help you catch up on the retirement savings you sacrificed for me." The offer was generous and thoughtful, but more importantly, it showed that Michael finally understood the full scope of what I had given up for his benefit. He understood that my sacrifices had not just been about time and energy, but about my own financial future and security. "Michael, I appreciate the offer," I said, "but you don't owe me anything." I chose to invest in your future because I loved you and believed in you. I know you don't think I owe you anything, he said, but I think I owe it to myself to make sure that the person who gave me everything has security and comfort in her retirement. It would make me happy to be able to give back to you the way you gave to me. We worked out an arrangement where Michael and Sarah would contribute to a retirement account for me, not as repayment for what I had spent on Michael's education, but as a way for them to show their appreciation for my sacrifice and their commitment to my well-being as I aged. But the most meaningful part of this arrangement was not the financial contribution itself, but what it represented. Michael's understanding that family relationships involve mutual support and care, that adult children have responsibilities to parents who have sacrificed for them, and that appreciation should be expressed through actions, not just words. 5 years after the graduation that had almost destroyed our relationship, Michael and Sarah had their first child, a daughter they named Patricia after me. When Michael called to tell me about the birth and the name they had chosen, he explained why they had made that decision. "We named her Patricia because we want her to grow up understanding the kind of woman her grandmother is," he said. "We want her to know that the most important values in our family, sacrifice, determination, unconditional love, and standing up for yourself, came from you." Holding my granddaughter for the first time, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain and disappointment of that graduation day had led to conversations and changes that had ultimately strengthened our relationship and taught us both valuable lessons about respect, appreciation, and what it means to truly value the people you love. Michael had learned that success is not just about individual achievement, but about acknowledging and honoring the people who make that achievement possible. He had learned that family relationships require active maintenance, that appreciation must be demonstrated through actions, and that treating people well is not optional, even when you assume they will always be there for you. I had learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish or cruel, but necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. I had learned that allowing people to take you for granted does not preserve relationships but weakens them. I had learned that demanding respect and appreciation is not unreasonable, but essential for your own dignity and self-worth. Most importantly, we had both learned that love alone is not sufficient to maintain relationships. Love must be accompanied by respect, appreciation, and conscious effort to treat the people you love in ways that honor their sacrifice and contribution to your life. Today, Michael is 30 years old, successful in his career, happily married, and the father of 2 children who are growing up with a clear understanding of their grandmother's role in their family's success and happiness. When he talks about his achievements, he always acknowledges the foundation that made those achievements possible. When he makes important decisions, he consults with me as someone whose wisdom and experience he values. When he celebrates milestones in his life, I am honored as the mother who made those milestones possible. But perhaps most importantly, he has become someone who appreciates the people in his life while they are alive and present, who acknowledge